According to director Jon Favreau, Halon is a company that utilizes state-of-the-art technology while never losing sight of the fact that the real job is to tell a story. Halon's artists have contributed to visually stunning blockbusters like the Hunger Games franchise, Avatar, World War Z, Jurassic World, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and many others.
You're placing the visual effects with the director so that he or she doesn't have to wait for the cycle of going to Weta, finding it, working through this big visual effects house, and then getting it back to them to make a call on what they want to have happen. They can sit there with us over our shoulder, and we just block in the rough blocking of all the visual effects, make sure it's working. We can show it to the studio, very soon without impacting the big schedules and the very large machine of a visual effects house. That they're doing a lot of work, and we are shortcutting everything.
Visual effects producer can come in very early on and be like, look, I know the director wants this. I know the editor wants this. We don't have the money for this, so you need to tone this down. And
this is Hollywood. There's always subtext too. They say they don't want this, and then they give you note after note after note after note after note until you do what you knew they really wanted but didn't say they wanted. They said don't do it, and then finally you get it approved. So there's that game too.
We recently incorporated the Unreal Engine into our previs and postvis workflow, and which really allows you to kind of get a more photoreal image. It's not photoreal, it looks like a video game of today rather than like in the 90s. But it really is like you can make lighting choices, atmospheric effect choices, choices where like if you needed like a splash or a fireball or something like that, those kinds of things are I guess better integrated into the image that take perhaps a little bit less work to get to look good. Whereas like with previs, you kind of cobble together, what you can to make a shot story be told.
When we're rendering to get a nice look, usually you're reliant on a render farm, and that's expensive. It takes time. It takes a lot of setup. And what the engine gives us is it's all on one machine, and that's why perhaps you might not realize, but that's why we're excited about it, because now we can do even more for the production by going into their offices, setting up our machine, and each artist in there can render more than we could have years ago. We would have needed a giant render farm, a giant capital expense, and it just made the process much slower.
So even rendering out of Maya, you have a scene, a crowd scene or something like that. You might hit like Play Blast, which is like Maya's version of rendering.
Screen capture.
Yeah, and it could take like a couple hours if it's super complex. But in a game engine, and just like the exact same scene looks way better, takes like 30 seconds. And so
so we're jazzed.
we've pushed it so it does take a long time. But that pushing it means that instead of a crowd of like 100 people, on screen, which is manageable, we could have a crowd of like 3,000 people, and it would start slowing down.
We got the stunt viz, we call it. We like to add viz to everything we get. Makes us feel important. So we got the stunt viz, and they would do a ton of stunts, amazing stuff, but it was always this much, but there was only time for this much in the movie, and so we would cut that down. The director, Jim Mangold, would give me the stunt coordinator's material. I would cut that down to what I felt like would tell the story. Then I would start injecting previs shots, and in Logan's case, we removed the backgrounds, which is a whole bunch of Home Depot boxes in the warehouse that they're throwing each other around in, and then I put it in a forest, and that's been a really great way to integrate stunts, because animating it by hand takes a lot of time. And so it's best to let the professional that's most focused, most able to add the most value, do that. And so we just add backgrounds behind the stunt viz.
Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for being in our panel.